My name is Jennifer Gill, and I'm the Director of Global Product Marketing at Zerto. And today we're going to be talking with Matt Compeau from a large financial institution, and he'll talk about his experience with Zerto. Before we move on from the first slide, a couple things I do like to point out. First, our awards. You can see we got Best of Show at VMworld in 2011, and that was actually just 3 weeks after we GA'd the first version of our product. So that really demonstrated to us that the market was ready for this type of capability, and there was a clear need for this type of replication. And then secondly, we do take questions, and we encourage you to ask them. So in the panel that showed up for me on the right-hand side of my screen, you'll see a questions panel there, and you can type them in. And we'll definitely take those at the end of the webinar. We'll take them throughout if applicable, and we can. But we'll definitely answer the questions at the end of the webinar. So as I mentioned, today we have Matt Compeau with us. He's going to talk about his organization, give you an overview of his environment, talk about the challenges they had with business continuity and disaster recovery, the purchasing process, and then why they selected Zerto. And then we'll go through an overview of Zerto Virtual Replication, and we will show you how to learn more. So Matt is a senior network architect at his organization. He has over 15 years of IT experience, and you can see he has experience in heavily regulated industries, so like healthcare and finance, where information needs to be protected in a very specific way. His day-to-day responsibilities include management of all aspects of the VMware environment, including provisioning, deployment, and maintenance. He's responsible for disaster recovery, backups, all the processes around that. And you can see he manages many other environments such as Microsoft, application environments, and Citrix. And at this point, I will turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Jennifer. First off, I want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar. I know your time is very valuable. I think we're going to cover some good content, and I think you're going to get some good information to take away from the next 53 minutes. So thank you for joining. Real quick, just an overview of my firm. I work in the finance sector. My firm has 4 offices located around the world, geographically spread out: London, Boston, Massachusetts, Menlo Park, California, and a data center location. Typical venture capital growth equity, one of the 50 largest private equity firms, and we do over $16 billion in investments currently. That's just a little bit of the background of my firm. Just to give you some perspective on where I work. We can go to the next slide, Jen.
It should be coming up for you. Okay, good. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, nope. It's a little fragmented on my screen. It's like it's stuck in between. Actually, it's not. I'm not sure what everyone else is. There we go. Finally loaded. Sometimes you can't tell whether it's on my end or whose end. So just a little bit about my environment. I'm 99% virtualized. What does that mean? That means anything that I can virtualize, I do. There are only a few exceptions of where I don't virtualize something, and that's if it's like an appliance type solution where they don't have a virtual machine capability, or if it just doesn't make sense to virtualize it. Maybe a vendor brings in even if it's a Windows-based security system or something like that. Wherever I can virtualize, I take advantage of that, all of the benefits that come with virtualization. I'm a pure VMware shop, top to bottom, running the ESXi. Been running that for about 8 years now, and have moved through the versions like everyone else, and it's really been solid, so I've stuck with the platform. As far as applications, Microsoft Shop pretty much top to bottom. Run in-house Exchange servers, SQL, IIS, CRM, Siebel, and about a half dozen or so custom-built financial and human resource applications. All of these applications run in what I deem my private cloud out of the main data center where my hardware is co-located. And that all makes up, right now, 46 virtual machines with about 10 terabytes of information. The majority of that data is all stored centrally at the co-location center in Waltham, and my disaster recovery location is in London. London is because it's a different continent, has its advantages, as well as I have an office there, so I have some feet on the ground to help with physical tasks that need to be done. We can go to the next slide. So I'll start off the next section by, this is challenges with continuity and disaster recovery, and I'll kind of rewind the clock for everyone. About 2 years ago, I identified a core section of my operations that needed to be addressed, and that was continuity and disaster recovery. I had a disaster recovery plan that had been developed over the previous number of years. As applications were requested and deployed, different solutions had to be implemented to fold them into the disaster recovery plan. RPOs and RTOs started to get more and more aggressive. Specifically the RPO, it got to the point where, if it's in production, well, we need it in the DR site, meaning, if that email hits my inbox and we lose power 30 seconds later, I want that email in my inbox that when we come up on the disaster recovery site, meaning, pretty much real-time replication. Applications can be required really without a lot of advance notice, and that proved to be challenging. So I identified that this had to be readdressed almost from the ground up. Let me go to the next slide, Jen. And what I was using at the time was a combination of many different point solutions to create a disaster recovery plan. Everything from SAN-based replication to get my VMFS volumes from point A to point B, VCB backups for retention, time data for SQL, log shipping, double take for file servers and Exchange real-time replication. This was a plan that required 4, 5, or 6 different people on a conference call, everyone knowing each one of these specific technologies, because no one person could possibly know how to operate all these different products and the intricacies and how they work and how they recover. And so it was a very painstaking process to do an actual disaster recovery failover. And this was clearly identified as something that I had to rectify, and I had to come up with a new way to do disaster recovery and business continuity. I looked at a lot of different products out there. I looked at, keep in mind, this is roughly 2 years ago. Site Recovery Manager was certainly one I looked at. Veeam was one I looked at. Looked at a few different products, and it became quite apparent to me that they all needed something else. At the time, SRM required array-based replication. Well, I wanted to get away from that. Or a 15-minute interval was as aggressive as they could get. Or Veeam required snapshots. And you can see under the purchase process portion there, I don't want anything to do with snapshots. That's not continuous data replication. That's snapshot, replicate, delete snapshot, rinse, lather, repeat. And that just didn't work for my aggressive RPO times. So I was turned on to Zerto, and I was a little skeptical, as one can be. As I'm sure most of you are aware, marketing rarely lives up to reality. So I said, that's great. It has, real-time replication. It doesn't use snapshots. I have a single administrative interface, so I don't have to have 4 different consoles running during a DR. I don't have to do SAN-based replication. It's hypervisor-based. All the criteria was kind of there. And in addition to the technical portion, I wanted something that I could train my staff on. I wanted a single console, I wanted any of my guys to be able to fly a disaster recovery operation, as well as testing. I'm highly regulated, and I have to do annual testing, so that was a component as well. So I started down the path of Zerto, got the demo installed, started to do my proof of concepts. Initial impressions were great, fast and easy to install. Literally did only take 30 minutes. You know, I was fully assisted over the phone, remote hands, and it was very painless. I was, you know, very quickly able to demonstrate how to fail over and fail back a machine after installation. And so, you know, initial impressions were good. Next slide, Jim. So, why Zerto? And I've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think these are really key points that make Zerto stand out. No snapshots. This is absolutely critical. Whenever you think about data replication and RPO times, you have to ask yourself, am I going to be using snapshots? And if you are, then there are some limitations to that. You won't get aggressive RPOs because the time it takes to do a snapshot just doesn't allow for it. Secondly, if you were to just continuously do snapshots, you're going to be running your production machines out of snapshots all day long. That's really not great for performance either. So getting rid of the snapshot reliability, or the snapshot need was absolutely critical to me. And I can't stress that enough. Being able to use all the existing facilities, vMotion and DRS and storage vMotion, all the things that as administrators we've come to know and love about VMware, all the tools they've built in, still work. This is purely a product that just rides on top and doesn't preclude you from using any of these other facilities. And that also is important, because I've spent a lot of time and manpower training my staff on how to do snapshots, how to do vMotion, and how to properly administer the VMware environment. And I don't want to have to now have new processes. So being able to use those existing facilities was very important. RPO, again, I need sub 30-second RPO times for my critical applications. Not every application, but email, file servers, database, and Zerto allows me to have that most effective and efficiently. And an RTO of minutes. The facility to fail over one or multiple machines is I can't stress this. It's about 3 clicks, and that's real. That's not marketing. That's not not taking into anything into account. It's literally pick one or multiple machines, hit failover, and click yes, I'm sure, and you're off to the races. And automation of the failover and failback, and just as important, testing. That absolutely had to be part of the solution that I decided on, and that certainly is in the Zerto product. We can go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about DR testing, and this is the second prong of what was a very painful process for me. The DR failover operations, I spoke and said how they were always very long, many people. Well, I also have to do annual testing, and this is the second prong of a very arduous and painstaking process. And I'll describe it to you like this. Under my old disaster recovery plan, which was very long and very cumbersome, DR testing I used to describe to people as the worst month of my entire year, every year, year after year. It was painstaking to get a lab in place and get the facilities set up just so I could do a test failover. It was terrible. I can't put it any other way. It was not fun. And so part of reworking my continuity and disaster recovery plan from the ground up was I wanted a better way to test, execute my annual test. It was a long process administered by very highly technical people, the MIS team. With Zerto, I have literally offloaded the entire testing to my compliance officer. Every year when it comes time to do the testing, I walk into her office, I log into the server, I've shown her the Zerto console, I show her how to do the test with the 3 clicks that I spoke about, with the slider bar on test and not live, of course. And then I walk away, and she fails the machines over. She logs on to the remote data center. She logs into the servers and verifies data integrity. And I don't even have to be a part of it. When she's done, she hits finish test within the Zerto interface, and it puts everything back the way it was. And all of this is without interrupting production, which is absolutely amazing. So production systems don't take a hit. They don't take a performance hit. Replication doesn't stop. It just mirrors the environment in a testing sandbox that is so easy that literally a non-technical person now drives this process. The savings in me not having to do that and drive that operation it makes it worth its weight in gold alone right there. So from a testing perspective, no doubt about it, that was a winner. The failover process is now executed in under 30 minutes. 30 minutes is probably the longest I've ever taken. I have done a few actual failovers, not just the test failovers, but actual failovers, and I'll go over those now. So previously, as I said, it took 6 people, a conference call, highly technical. No one knows all the different moving pieces, and in one case, it literally took us 12 hours to get it working. With Zerto, I've been able to have what I would classify as 3 different failover types. One was a test failover, which we've talked about. The other 2 are what I call proactive and reactive failovers, and I've actually executed on both. The first classification, the proactive failover, is an event in which I know something's going to happen, or I want to do something ahead of an outage. So I get wind that we're going to have a 30-minute whatever comm circuit outage for maintenance. I proactively fail my infrastructure over to my secondary data center using Zerto. I can do that at a time I specify. It's proactive. I use the facility to fail it over. I use the facility to fail it back at times that are convenient for me. No muss, no fuss. The third type of failover is reactive, and that's when you don't know something's going to happen. We've had a power outage. You've had a snowstorm, a blizzard, or a hurricane, or something's taken out your primary data center or your primary systems, and you need to fail over. I've had that happen as well, and I've had to actually go in, fail the machines over. In this case, I had a power outage. Power was restored. Zerto started replicating back, and I failed back when the time was right for me. In all of those instances, the motions are all the same, the buttons are all the same, and it takes the same amount of time. I don't have to make decisions based on the application. I no longer have to think, well, I'm using double take for exchange, so let me do this first, and then I'll get the databases up by going into time data. No. That's all gone. I now just pick the machines I want to fail over, and I fail them over. And that's it. And I can't stress that enough. Consolidation of these continuity and disaster recovery products, consolidating down into one intuitive solution that I can train people on this is now achievable. Previously, it was, I used to describe my old plan as a house of cards, and you pull any one of those cards doesn't work right, or that person, heaven forbid, is on vacation, the whole thing comes crumbling down. And that's really the world I was living in. With this new disaster recovery plan, utilizing Zerto as the primary and sole product, everyone knows how to execute. I can now take a vacation and not have to worry about what happens if we have an unexpected power outage. I have junior level guys who are more than capable now of learning a single interface, becoming familiar, and are certainly capable of performing a failover. And with that, you get certain advantages. You can use the facility. Now that there's a single facility, you can use it to your advantage. You can perform maintenance on machines. You can move part of your infrastructure to a different data center, do maintenance, move it back later. There are a whole slew of options that are now available, at least in my mind, in my world, because it's a single solution. It's very versatile. It's hypervisor-based, so I don't have to be worried about snapshots or replication intervals. It just makes everything easier, and that's really the bottom line. The consolidation of all these different products into one. It almost pays for itself in licensing alone. I don't know that I can go that far. Everyone's different, but you can run your own matrix and see. And that's pretty much my experience in a nutshell. So I just in a brief summary, I took a 300-page complex continuity and disaster recovery process with 4 or 5 different products, and I was able to consolidate that down into a single interface that's easy to use, easy to test, and easy to train on. And I sleep a lot. Frankly, I sleep a lot better at night now. Just knowing that when the unexpected happens, I'm not going to be sweating bullets on if that house of cards is going to be crumbling down or not around me. So I will turn it back over to Jennifer, and I'll hang out for the duration to answer questions.
All right, great. Thanks, Matt. That was a fantastic overview. So far we have one question which I can answer. So someone asked if they could get the slides. So I do have your contact information, so I can certainly PDF the presentation and send it your way. So unless there are any other questions, that will come in really quick. Otherwise, we go with the product overview. And as I mentioned, we will take questions at the end for sure. All right, I hope I'm not giving anyone a disadvantage by if you're a slow typer, but we are going to move on. So you can see why I want you to speak with Matt, hear Matt's story first, because it's just so much more compelling in terms of seeing how this works in kind of the real world scenario and how it's going to make your environment better and really simplify things for you overall. If we take a step back and look at, what kind of motivated Zerto to take a look at a new approach to disaster recovery, it's really everyone kind of moving towards a software-defined data center. People don't want to have dependencies on a hardware layer or, some other aspect of their environment. They really wanted to have everything in the hypervisor. The reason for that is if it's outside the hypervisor, it's really undermining your investment in virtualization. So you heard Matt talk about he can still use things like DRS and vMotion and things like that, because if you're using replication in the storage layer, you're really undermining that investment. So with Zerto, we take the replication from the storage layer and move it up into the hypervisor layer, really aligning your virtualization strategy. So Matt touched on a lot of these already. So virtual aware, so what does that mean? One, we replicate virtual machines and VMDKs. And because we replicate that layer, we're aware of changes that you make, like with vMotion and DRS. It's a software-only solution, so again, removing any dependencies on hardware and replicating Tier 1 enterprise class. So really built for production workloads. And you heard Matt discuss the SLA that he's able to achieve with Zerto, even replicating from Waltham to London. And then the automation. So a lot of companies or solutions will be like, oh, well, we do the replication piece, or we do the orchestration piece. That's really just half of the solution. You need to effectively replicate the data, and you need to be able to make that data useful quickly through automated recovery.
Hey, Jen, I just wanted to chime in because I forgot one, I think, very important thing, and I just want to let everyone know that I'm not a Zerto employee. I am an actual customer who purchased the product. I get absolutely no kickback for doing this. So if you have candid questions, fire away, and I'm going to be honest, whether Jen likes it or not. So I just wanted to point that out to everyone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We want candid questions for sure. Absolutely. So here we're going to go through an architecture of Zerto. So this is just a simple overview, and I say simple because here we have 2 sites, and Zerto is able to protect across multiple sites. You can see we have the Zerto Virtual Manager that plugs right into vCenter Server, and that's the only piece of software that you'll touch. On each ESX host, you install a Zerto Virtual Replication appliance. Very lightweight appliance, maybe 5% overhead on the ESX host overall, and that's what's going to do the actual replication in the environment. So you can see we have all different types of storage there across the bottom because we can replicate from anything to anything. So a couple of use cases where this has come about is someone has older storage that maybe isn't quite off maintenance yet, but they don't want to use it in production. Use that at your DR site. Buy the brand new stuff for your production environment, and we can replicate from that brand new shiny storage array to your one that's just a couple of years older. Also, people want to try out new technologies. For example, we work with flash array vendors, and they don't always want to have two in their environment to customers because they don't want to have to replicate at that storage layer. With Zerto, buy one flash array, see if you like it, and again, you can replicate from that new technology to that older piece of hardware. Because it's a software-only solution, it's highly scalable. As you add another ESX host within your environment, you just add another virtual replication appliance. So you don't have a physical appliance that, if you have 5 or 10 ESX hosts, maybe the replication's going okay. What happens when you get to 15 or 20? Because everyone's environment is growing. No one's environment's getting smaller over time. They're growing over time. So you want to make sure you have something that scales with the growth. The continuous block level replication gives you RPOs of seconds, and you saw Matt was able to achieve right around 20 seconds again. And then the journal, so that is a repository of points, checkpoints. It can hold 1 hour up to 5 days worth of data. And if you have an issue, maybe you did an upgrade, maybe a junior employee came in and made some changes to a VM, and now the VM's not functioning as it should. What you can do is just roll back to, say that happened at 4 o'clock today. You roll it back to 3:59 and 48 seconds, and you've completely undone that change.
So that's a great point, and I think it's worthwhile me jumping in here real quick because
sure.
Literally a week ago Friday, I had a real-world situation where I needed to get some data off of a database server, and the previous night's backup was not going to be sufficient. I needed it from during the middle of the day, that Friday, and I leveraged Zerto to get that data from a point in time along the replication timeline. So you're able to keep real-time replication as far back as up to 5 days. And so all I did is I did a test failover of a machine from like 5 hours prior. Then I logged on my database guys, and they extracted whatever data they need, and then I concluded the test. So I actually leveraged the testing facility as an easy way to pull data from a few hours prior. That particular machine only got additional backups, on a nightly basis. So it gives you that almost an extra layer of backup and protection as well that you can pull from.
Yeah, that's a great use case, Matt. Oh, and then we also have some bandwidth optimization, so we do compression and throttling to make sure that replication is not dominating your network. Okay, so when your end users come to, I'm sure they don't say, hey, I can't get into the stable space. They say, what's going on with email? I can't get into SQL. What's going on with SharePoint? I can't get into this application. So Zerto, recognizing that, creates something called a virtual protection group. And it's a group of VMs that are associated with a particular application. And we make sure that no matter where those VMs are in the environment, they are protected consistently and with right order fidelity. So this gives you that extra layer in terms of, maybe having an application consistent version that you can recover to. So you support things like VSS, hot backup mode in Oracle to give you that extra little layer of protection.
Think about it this way. You're not going to fail over machines. You're going to fail over applications.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, very rarely do people want to do. Although I do know of a customer that instead of putting, they have a VM per virtual protection group. That's how they wanted to design their plan. They do only have 17 VMs, though, so for them it's feasible. I have another customer who's protecting 600 VMs, Clearly, they don't have 600 virtual protection groups. So it just depends on what works for your environment. But yeah, at the application layer, gives it just that extra level of granularity. Okay, so we've talked kind of about half the solution, so replicating the data, getting it to the other side, but now we want to make it usable. So this is kind of where there's a difference between replication products and full disaster recovery products. If you have a replication product, they'll fail over, the data's on the other side, and they're like, okay, well, it's there, go have fun with it. With Zerto, once you want to fail over, we start a process and build the VMs on the target site. So now it's minutes to your end users having access to those applications. It's not just, well, the data's there, have at it. So that's how we're able to achieve that RTO of minutes, because we start building the virtual machines in the right boot order, re-IPing if you need to do that, so that end users can now access applications and you're not affecting end user productivity.
So
Matt, did you want to add something there?
Yeah. So the technical piece behind that, just to kind of boil it down, is really, you look at it like this. You've got a virtual machine running in your production environment. When you go through those 3 clicks, as I outlined earlier, what happens is the machine in the remote site, assuming that they're still talking to each other, there are many different cases, but the easiest way to explain this is the production machine gets turned off, replication I/O gets flushed down the pipe, machine gets removed from inventory. On the remote side, it spins up a new virtual machine, has all the configuration, all the disk, all the networking, and fires that bad boy up. And then from there, it's online. And so your 3 clicks literally, creates a virtual machine. It assigns all the hardware properties. It gets the disk assigned. Everything that you would have to do manually if you were, SAN-based replication and mounting VMFS volumes and finding VMX, add to inventory, all that. No, none of that. It's all done behind the scenes with those 3 clicks. It literally creates that machine on the fly for you.
Great. That was a much better explanation than I gave. Thanks, Matt. And then the click to test anytime. So Matt actually just gave a really great example of that. So you can roll back to the journal and then test at different points in time. That's done in an isolated network, in a bubble network, so it doesn't affect production at all. So and you can do this anytime you want. And then after this test is completed, as Matt mentioned, you'll gracefully shut down the environment. And it also delivers a recovery report, and we'll see that in a couple of slides, and auditors love the recovery reports. Offsite cloning, so what you can do is make a copy of an entire application and use that in another part of your environment to use for test and development. So now people are doing testing and development off an application, how it looked, 5 minutes ago or an hour ago, or whatever version you want to give them, versus the backup from 3 weeks ago. So it's a much more a higher quality development that you're going to get. So Zerto Offsite Backup is a feature we added in June. So we're already replicating the data at the target site, and it's there, and we thought, why don't we make it more useful for end users? Why don't we make it more useful for IT? So now, from that replicated data, you can take a backup, and that can be stored locally to the recovery site. It can be stored to a third site, and you can also store in the public cloud like Amazon. So this dramatically reduces the impact on production applications, because if you think about, we're putting 5% overhead, on the continuous replication, tops 5% on your ESX hosts. Backup, because it's snapshot-based, usually puts a little bit more. So now you can take off that snapshot impact. You're able to extend, this is a good way to extend the journal as well. So now, instead of having only the 5 days worth of data, we now store daily copies for a week, weekly copies for a month, and then monthly copies for a year. So it helps you enhance your disaster recovery services. And it's something we're kind of seeing in the market. We're seeing this convergence of disaster recovery and backup solutions to give you a more complete data protection solution.
If anybody's ever wanted to eliminate a service like Iron Mountain or get rid of your backup tapes and anything like that, because I used to do that as well, Offsite Backup can help you with that. The data's already offsite. All you need is retention. And this new functionality fits that need.
Nice, thanks. Simple management from anywhere. So as I mentioned, we have the vCenter vSphere plugin. We also have a browser-based version. One of our customers puts a link to the browser-based version actually in his SharePoint site, because you do need full vCenter privileges to log into Zerto, and he didn't want his manager going in there and doing things with his virtual machines, which I thought was kind of funny. But all the manager needed was access to these reports. So now he gets access to just the Zerto piece, and he can go in there and run the reports that he thinks he needs. So as I mentioned earlier, we do support multiple site replication migration. So we replicate from several sites to one shared infrastructure. Our product is natively multi-tenant, so you're able to get a higher ROI out of your infrastructure. You can have bi-directional replication. So some customers, they don't have a dedicated DR site. They have, 2 production sites where they're running 50% of their applications in one site's production, 50% in the other. And then when they do failover, they're able to, they only have to fail over half the environment. So some other solutions actually don't support bi-directional replication. It's, you have a cold site and a hot site. With Zerto, you can have 2 hot sites.
Just to chime in, I actually ran in that type of setup when I first went into production. Just to add value as a customer, I've run in both configurations. I actually used Zerto as part of my consolidation effort. I had 3 offices all with local services, and they were all kind of replicating to each other. And I dropped Zerto in that infrastructure, and it worked great. And then I decided to go to a co-location architecture, and I used Zerto to leverage getting the data from all my offices to the co-location center as well. So both are very applicable and very works very well in production under both. They're both equal in capability.
Yep, and many customers use this for that scenario actually. Some, to migrate their data from all the different sites and gets it over to where it needs to be. As you know, strict replication, strict latency requirements. So, you can replicate from anywhere to anywhere, like Waltham to London.
I run at about an 80 millisecond latency, just for those who are curious.
And we also support local and remote office. So if you have a single vCenter, so actually I'm not sure if Matt, if you were in this configuration, but when you think about like a company, you have a large data center, maybe in Boston, and you have satellite offices around it. That might be all in one vCenter instance, but physically they're separate.
Yep.
Yeah, is that how you were running?
I've actually got both. So I've got
Okay.
I've got 2 vCenters for my 2 data centers, but all of my satellite offices all are managed from one of the data centers, and I can choose. So imagine data center A has got its primary infrastructure, but it then also has the ESXi servers that are living in Boston and in California, and I can have Zerto replicate those to itself, if you will, like it's within the data center in VMware, which actually would be Waltham, or I can have it replicate to the other one, either or. But yeah, self-replication within vCenter is very useful because you don't want to have to license a vCenter for satellite offices. It's very expensive and cost prohibitive. So maybe you have, satellite locations A, B, C, and D all managed from a central vCenter. Well, they all can replicate anywhere within the vCenter infrastructure, so it's very convenient.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. And then lastly, of course, we do work with cloud providers. So if you were interested in something like that, cover as a service, we have many cloud providers that you could work with. So comprehensive reporting, so as I mentioned, the audit reports are a favorite of auditors. You can see it there. It shows each step within the recovery process. It'll give you a green success or a red fail that the step didn't complete. So you'll see all the steps, did they execute properly, and then the time it took. And then this gives you a way to predict what it's going to take for your environment to come up. So, I have a customer who knows that he's going to be able to recover SharePoint in 2 minutes and 43 seconds because he's run his test 5 times and it's come out right around that time. So this gives you a way to predict what your failover times are going to be. Detailed resource planning, so you can look at, WAN consumption. You look at what the VM is consuming on the source and the target sites. So you can look at, am I going to need more storage? What's it looking like? How's my bandwidth going? So help you plan for future purchases. Performance charts, so you can see what's going on there. And then, of course, a backup report, so you can see how the backup's executed on a VPG level. So you heard Matt already talk about his very complex manual process, so his 300-page, fun DR plan. So complex, manual, and inflexible. And it's just you need 6 people on the phone for 12 hours trying to execute, a failover. With Zerto, now he has a very easy process. 3 clicks and you're done. And the setup is pretty easy too. So all you do is make sure you have enough storage, select the VMs you want, you put them in your virtual protection group, you configure your boot order, your production failover IP, your test failover IP, what you want your journal to be, what you want your offsite backups to be, and then you're off and running. And that's it. So we talked a lot about private cloud BCDR, so that's essentially what Matt has in his environment. We can also do disaster recovery as a service, as I mentioned. If you do check a cloud provider and you decide you really like them and you might have a cranky application or two that you'd really like to get rid of, give the entire application to the cloud provider and they'll host the production and the disaster recovery for you. And we call that in-cloud BCDR. And we have many great cloud providers that we work with, as I mentioned, all around the world. So, so lastly, in closing, so we have a truly virtual product that's built to protect your production workloads. We protect at the application level. It's scalable, it's software only, and very simple. And with that, if you have any questions, so my name is Jennifer Gill, you can certainly email me. I am going to take questions that have come in throughout the webinar. Shannon Snowden's on the line also. He's our Senior Technical Marketing Architect. If you do want to get in touch with Matt, if you send me an email, I can put you in touch with him. And as my question panel went away, I have to come out of slideshow mode. Here we go. I'll just put this back up. Okay. We have many questions now. Okay. So you might know this, Matt. So does the VRA have built-in WAN acceleration for throughput and bandwidth considerations?
There are bandwidth, how do I say this? There are settings you can put to throttle bandwidth, certainly, or to give more or less bandwidth to an application. You can adjust that per application or per protection group. And there are some canned categories. You can categorize a virtual protection group as high, medium, or low priority, and that kind of pseudo puts in, when there's maybe some bandwidth constraints, who gets first crack at it, things like that. So there are overrides. So I think the answer is yes, there are overrides, and if you're really interested in kind of just what out of box, there are just with simple categorizations, a very easy way to kind of give priority to the bandwidth.
Shannon, anything else to add to that?
No, that's a good answer. Basically, it's, as Matt said, multiple levels. There's also the compression of the actual VPG itself, so you can either toggle that on or off.
That's
and if you have, and also if you have like a hardware accelerator, you can toggle it off and let the hardware accelerator, like a Riverbed or the Silverpeak, take that as well. You can also throttle us at the site level. So let's say your recovery site over in periods of the time during the day you need to maybe auto throttle that. You can certainly do that as well. So there's, I think Matt described it the best. There's several different layers that you can kind of fine tune it to what works best for you.
Matt, I'm sorry, it sounded like you wanted to add a little bit more.
I was just going to say that's an excellent point, because I actually do have riverbeds implemented between my data centers, and I use the Zerto compression on top of that, and I've seen benefits from both. There's just some data that Riverbed doesn't deal with very well, and Zerto is able to further compress it. So I actually use them both in parallel and get good results from them both.
Yeah, that's really the philosophy of the whole design of our product with the existing infrastructure, is not to try to supersede whatever you have. It's just overlay and work with it.
Okay, great. Someone's asking what are the requirements in terms of the network, and I can actually answer this question. So we require at least a 5 megabit per second connection between sites, and that's the minimum requirement. So most customers have, actually I can't say most customers have more or less. Most of, well, they have to have more because that's a requirement. So that's the minimum that we need. And then Shannon, a question for you, the VRA, what kind of appliance is that on the ESX host?
That's a Debian Linux. Very simple, very low overhead. I think Matt can talk to that as well. They're not they don't consume very much as far as resources go on the host.
Yeah, I think it deploys with a 2 gig of memory and very little disk space out of box, and you don't really manage it. You don't have anything really to do with this virtual machine. It just sits on the host, and the Zerto software kind of manages it. Once you deploy it through the little wizard, you don't vMotion it, you don't storage vMotion it, you don't have any. Everything is done for you behind the scenes during the deployment.
Okay, great. That's actually all the questions that we got today. I will give everyone a minute to type in any last-minute questions. The only other thing I'd like to add is we do proof of concepts free of charge. And if you're thinking about Zerto, kind of on the fence, I encourage you to do a proof of concept. As Matt mentioned, it installs quickly in 30 minutes. It's a non-disruptive installation. You do not need to reconfigure your applications. You don't need to change anything in your environment. So in 30 minutes, you can be up and running, and you can test it in your environment and see if it's the right solution for you. And we highly encourage you to try the product.
I'll just chime in here since we've got a few minutes left for whoever is still on. I would encourage everyone, if you're at all interested, to do the proof of concept, because I don't know about everybody else, but I've become increasingly frustrated in the last 5, 6, 7 years with products not living up to marketing, and what a colossal waste of time it can be to invest man-hours in trying to figure out a complicated solution that really doesn't work as advertised anyway. This is just not one of those solutions. This works as advertised. It delivers on what they say it can do, and it's very easy to set up and deploy and even test, even proof of concept. So I would tell you, if you're at all interested, don't take their word for it. Get the proof of concept. It doesn't cost you a penny, and it's going to work as advertised. And I just find that refreshing, and that's just like another checkbox for me. You can do what you say you can do. Okay, that's why I'm now doing things like this for them to help grow the product, because I don't want this product to go away. I sleep better at night with this product in place, and I know it does what it can do, and I've used it. So, I just try to help grow the product because I want them to be, around for a while. So that's my motivation, and I would pass that on to everyone.
Well, Matt, I don't think I could say anything else better than that. So with that note, we didn't have any more questions. Everyone, thank you so much for your time today. Matt, as always, thank you so much for participating today. Shannon,
absolutely, my pleasure.
Shannon, thanks for bailing me out on the tough questions, although they weren't too bad today.
Sure.
And everyone, thank you so much